Well, welcome back to the third Greenhouse Gas Inventory System training workshop. I am Yoo-jung Kim, Senior Development Management Expert at UNOSD, and I will be your moderator today. For this year's Greenhouse Gas Inventory System training workshop, we are focusing on sharing country experiences and lessons learned from developing new or updated NDCs. Yesterday, we had a very timely presentation from UNFCCC Secretariat, and we also heard from Korea, Bangladesh, and the Philippines on their experiences. Today, we have 4 more countries to share their stories, and they are Thailand, Pakistan, Singapore, and Nepal. Before that, I would like to open the workshop with Ms. Aneta Nikolova's presentation. Ms. Nikolova is an Environmental Affairs Officer at UNESCOP, and she will speak about the progress of NDC implementation in Asia Pacific. If you're ready, please, Ms. Aneta Nikolova.
I would like to thank first to the organizers of the event, Mr. Park and the team from the UN Office for Sustainable Development and the TG office in Thailand. This is a great pleasure, and I really hope that next year we could do it even more jointly. And look into a longer event training if you would like to. So I'm very actually honored to be here and very happy, and would like to give you a short presentation and discuss a little bit on the progress of NDC implementation in Asian Pacific. Next slide, please. Um, yeah, so we heard a little bit about the global situation, but I just want to raise again the warming temperature to show you the warming temperature situation, that we are actually not really on the right track globally, and neither to reach the 2%, the 2 degrees, nor the 1.5 by 2030 or 2 by 2050. So next slide, please. This is based, the statement is based on the United Nations Environment Emissions Gaps Report, and the next slide will show you the latest 2030 report findings. So they start with the optimistic note that maybe the the Copenhagen Agreement of 2009 and Cancun pledges that we are doing good there, but the Paris Agreement pledges and the desire to reduce to the temperature, to contain the temperature increase within 2 degrees, and even to become by 2030 below the 1.5 degrees. These are um, ambitious targets, and we are not on the right track. So next slide, please. What is the situation? Even I think the second half of the year, despite of the pandemic, countries, or maybe because of that, countries managed to really put their thoughts on the updating of the NDCs, and so there was quite a number of submissions. Next slide, we'll be talking about our regional submissions, but there was quite a lot of submissions in 2030 of updated NDCs. As you know, the basically the countries decided, many countries pledged that INDCs can become NDCs, and they were kind of more declarative. So there was a need to write and review the commitments, look into the sectoral emissions. So what we see in 2020, basically, when you look at the unconditional NDC scenarios and the conditional NDC scenarios, even the 2 degrees limit are not within reach. So the emissions on the steep rise, and there is a big issue, and there is a need for quick action. We need to actually reduce with 7.6% annually our emissions from last year to 2030 to be able to achieve these targets. Next slide, please. Now, what can be done? right? So this is the time now. The countries that have not submitted their updated NDCs is a good time for them because they can get additional more guidance and to look into their targets in more into depth and to look into becoming more ambitious in them. And many of these ambitions are not really that much unachievable. They're actually quite plausible. And with the right support from all actors, these targets could be well aligned. Another area is to look at the non-GHG targets. This is also very important to look at that because they are we could advance them in the sectoral areas. We could also declare more intent, and then we could also adapt more and new and updated sectoral non-GHG targets. We also need to look more into the policies and actions. And I will talk a little bit later about our region. We've done a good review of the enabling conditions. Um, there's quite a lot of room there to work on the enabling conditions, interministerial collaboration strengthening, bringing the NDCs into the development plans, assigning national budgets to support NDC targets, and looking at the long-term goals and alignments. Next slide, please. So when we look at the gaps, the first thing we think also is that the energy sector is where we need to address urgently the gaps. That's true. But there is more potential in the industry sector, for example, of raising our industrial efficiency of efficiency of our energy use in the industrial processes, looking into the untapped nature based solutions for capture of carbon capture, reforestation more, looking into the transport as well, and land use patterns, and especially those natural environments which have great potential for capturing carbon, and also in our residential sector. Next slide, please. So where are we now in Asia Pacific? Um, Let me give you first an overview. So basically, as I mentioned, many of the countries decided when they joined the Paris Agreement that their INDCs will become NDCs. But now we see that they have managed from 2000 to really put some efforts on updating their NDCs submitted and to put some more new NDCs. And this year we have 18 countries from our region that have provided updated NDCs, and one country, Brunei, are completely new because they have decided that their INDC would not be considered as NDC. What does it mean in terms of opportunities here? So I would like to tell you that basically sorry, that slide is not on the presentation that is with you. I worked a little bit today on it to do some analysis, but to tell you basically what happened is that from these 19 countries, 17 countries have unconditional targets. 7 countries have both conditional and unconditional targets. What do this mean? These targets cumulatively would, if they're well implemented, they will lead to combined emissions of about 6.4 gigaton of these countries that we are mentioning. And that is actually a reduction of about 41% from the 2017 emissions for these 19 countries, which amounts about 10.4 gigatons. So which is quite good, but it's still not enough, right? Even with the conditional targets being implemented, reduction of only 55% will be achieved. That is by 2030, right? Of this emissions. So that is not enough. If we go to the next slide, we see that the pledges from our region, now we see here a ratio between our emissions per country, the pledges, and the GDP per capita. And so we see that there's quite a lot of room to work in the countries and to do. And then we are very happy to know that 9 countries in the region have pledged to become carbon neutral by 2050. And among them is the Republic of Korea, for which we congratulate the Republic of Korea for being so ahead and setting a great example. And China is also among these countries with the possibility either to reduce their emissions to net zero by 2050 or 2060. And that is now a more serious pledge. Now, if we um, consider this pledges, these commitments, plus the situation, we see that the other countries, about 41 two countries in our region, have a good target to go ahead to look into this opportunity for really stepping up on measures that will reduce their carbon emissions in their pledges. Next slide, please. Now, the story is that our region relies on economic growth for poverty reduction, and there is a strong ambition, and even the middle income countries are growing quite well, and that ambition is there and will continue for the years ahead. But also countries with less income, they're striving, especially LDCs, they're striving to graduate, and they also would like to grow. So the projections for growth in such way that we basically see that our emissions would be, the growth is going to grow. There's no curbing of that, and it's not really a low carbon growth, unfortunately, um, despite of some of the commitments to green growth in the region. And we see that expected projected emissions by 2060 are about 60 gigatons, which is way above the target of reducing emissions in our region. So this is not a very positive trend. But how can we need to do something with this economic growth? And also, we mentioned yesterday COVID, and there was some hope that because of the lockdown, there was reductions of emissions, and that reductions, that there was actually complete slowdown of emissions for the first 4 or 5 months of the year. But by the end of the year, we reached just below 35 gigatons CO2 emissions equivalent, which was just short of the little bit shorter than 36.7 from 2019, which was the highest emission year. So yeah, we're not freezing. By 2020 we're not capping, and I think this year would be even more heavy, and that growth that we are projecting by 2060 of the emissions, with the middle income countries leading the growth in the region, is a reality we need to face. So when we look at the next slide, we will see, if you click one more time, and then SDG 13 will show, we see also that in terms of not only emissions, but also in commitments to the SDGs, because on SDG 13 they're aligned. We are also not very well advancing, and we're actually regressing, and there's a trend of increase there. So this is a serious issue to consider for action. So what can be done? What needs to be done? Well, one of the things, if you could go to the next, one more slide. Yes, one of the measures we are recommending is to phase out coal and to look at ending fossil fuel subsidies. And what we mean about phasing out coal, at least stop building new coal-fired power plants. So the investments in these coal-fired power plants are considerable, and they're locked down for at least 30 to 40 years ahead. So that is even further slowing the opportunity for addressing the emissions in the energy production sector. Next slide, please. One good option is to to curb the desire to emit when we are producing, um, to use too much energy which is fossil based. We need to put the price of the carbon on the market. We need to rectify the market failure here. And there is a need to look into more carbon markets in the region. The potential for the latest macroeconomic model that ESCAP has developed for the Economic and Social Survey shows that carbon pricing actually has the potential to stimulate low carbon growth and, contrary to the thinking and the fears, to create new jobs or job opportunities, to create also opportunities for competitiveness. We know that the European Union now is committed into really stringent measures of trading with countries, especially from our region. We are the production hub of the world at the moment. Um, and so they would be requiring that there is a carbon pricing equivalent, or even goods that are imported from Europe to Asia would become more expensive and the consumer will bear that. So we need to do something at our end, and we have good examples in the region. Republic of Korea has advanced very much in this area, and is a fantastic example of emissions trading schemes and carbon pricing. Carbon credit cards for individual consumers are here on the planning, and this is something very interesting for our region to demonstrate and promote further. But there are other countries in the region that are advancing, like Singapore, Kazakhstan. Others are considering even further declaration. Japan has mentioned they're interested in doing that. And now we are doing a joint study with UNEP on ASEAN sub-region, because there was an interest for that from the Philippines and Indonesia, and we know that Thailand is planning something as well. So we are doing a feasibility study on possibility to do carbon pricing mechanisms and carbon markets in the region, and we're going to be doing some macroeconomic modeling, and we will be very happy to work with Thailand for country scenario development and modeling in this direction. Next slide, please. So another important action is to increase the share of renewable energies. And even in colder countries, solar is a very viable option. For example, Mongolia is one of the countries that has a lot of sunshine, despite of the fact that it has very cold winters, but the sun is there. So solar thermal might not be a good option, but pure solar could be a good option. So opportunities with renewable energies, the focus need to be on batteries and storage. So then there's opportunity to transmit and to a time when there's no wind or there's no solar available. So there is a great potential. ASEAN is one of the highest potential ASEAN countries with the highest potential in our region for renewable energy development. Pacific also, by the way, Pacific countries, fantastic opportunities there. And even for using biogas, biogas is a very good option as well, from domestic farms, and from also from domestic waste. Next slide, please. Also, when we look at the sectors, as I mentioned earlier, globally, also in our region, there's a lot of potential for GHG emissions reduction in the industrial sectors. Energy efficiency is the quickest solution for reduction of the emissions, and also for creating new jobs and opportunities for also for improving the price structure of the products, more profits, opportunities for reinvestment in technology and in innovation. Yes, next slide, please. And the nature-based solutions. We very often expand our urban lifestyle and our urban sprawl, forgetting and destroying valuable nature, natural carbon sinks like peatlands and swamps as well. And it's really very important to utilize this option. Mangroves in our ASEAN sub-region are very important coastal areas. They are they have double dividend for doing mitigation and adaptation. So there is a lot of opportunities to look into this sector. We know that the definition of the nature-based solutions is still under question because IUCN meeting did not happen this year, but and there's more opportunities to enhance the discussions and agreements under the Paris Agreement negotiations for the nature-based solutions, because they are not really strongly mentioned as a solution. But this is an area where countries with good natural resources should look into it. Next slide, please. So I would like to, this slide is showing you a couple of knowledge products that we have available that we have released last year. We have released a very comprehensive um, um, guidebook on accelerating implementation of the Paris Agreement for policymakers in 6 areas of the climate summit of the Secretary General, and that includes energy transition, industry transition, nature-based solutions, disaster risk reduction, adaptation. So it's a very detailed, providing a wealth of knowledge of good cases, practices, and opportunities for financing. Climate finance is also there. Different financial initiatives in our region available for support of country needs. We also released the COVID-19 NDC policy brief, where we found out that basically there's a lot of opportunities, and there are untapped opportunities in green recovery that have been overlooked because there was a very quick action to do recovery packages that are solving the social problems without thinking that they might not be energy efficient, GHG emissions efficient. They could be counter-productive to the NDCs. But actually, surprisingly, there were more than 110 initiatives that are sort of a green recovery, low carbon, but they are not matching with the commitments in the NDCs, for example, of the country. So there's quite a lot of opportunities there for synergies and for looking into it, because then we will have to look for the same thing for money 2 times. So this is very important. The other one we did is a progress on NDC implementation in Asia Pacific, and we looked at the enabling environments, and we categorized the success of countries accordingly. It's a methodological framework, and we will be continuing developing this study this year. It will be released for the Climate Week in September. We work a lot with the En-ROADS and C-ROADS simulators. These are very interesting online simulators which provide opportunities to play with different policy instruments and technological innovations to see that the tools that help to reduce emissions, they are not one straight jacket. You have to have a combination of policies with tools and technological innovations as well to work together. And then the last one I leave here for you to know is the next slide is, I think is, no, it's a bit later. But this is about the GHG emissions tool that we have developed, and I have a slide, and I will talk about it later. So um, here in this slide, thank you very much, you see the 4 enabling factors that we looked at. First of all, we looked how the national climate, how climate change is mainstreamed in the national development policies. The second one was how well are the interagency coordination mechanisms working. For the NDC production, we saw that this is not really very functioning well. On the monitoring and review of NDCs, there's a lot of work to be done. That's the next factor. And the national climate finance and resources, another enabling factor. So when you look at the next slide, you're going to see that yes, this is the categorization of the countries. We see that most of the countries are in engaged. So it means that they have started developing certain mechanisms, policies, legal frameworks. Things are moving, but they're not finalized. So they're not in that capable group. And we see that there's quite a large number of countries that are also in the nascent stage. So next slide is providing you an overview of the countries for each of the enabling activities where they stand in the different subregions, right? So we have in our categorization of countries here, we have the North and Central Asia, we have South and West Asia, we have Southeast Asia, East and Northeast Asia, where Republic of Korea falls in, and Pacific subregions. So we have 5 subregions, and in that subregion, the countries were assessed. It's like a cumulative assessment of the countries where they're standing. So when we're looking at this, how well are the NDCs mainstreamed into the national development policies, we see that there's quite a lot to be desired still, and in each sub-region is in a different stage. We see this North and Central Asia is leading actually quite well because the most engaged the countries are in that sub-region. And Southeast Asia is following because there's also very well into the capable area as well, and Eastern and Northeast Asia also. So if we go to the next slide, we see whereas we have the readiness for coordination. So that this is the area where they have national committees for NDC implementation. There is also vertical coordination, and for that Southeast Asia is maybe leading the way the most because of the quite well developed, especially like we have in Indonesia, tagging at the sub-national level already of NDC commitments, what kind of areas are responding to that. So that leads the countries to be a bit more into the capable, to be more leaning towards capable level. When we go to the next slide, the categorization of the countries on financing. This is based on if they have mechanisms for engaging the private sector in the NDC implementation, if they are accredited to GCF, if they have certain banking regulations or measures that are advice that is giving preferential funding for low carbon development. So in this area, again, we see that countries vary and they're trying. Yes, we see that there's a different level of progress and there's quite a lot more to be done. On the next slide, you will see how far the monitoring the MRV systems. And we're looking at the MRVs not only for the climate, for the GHG emissions reduction measurement, but also for investment. Right? For there are different level of requirements there. So we see here that we have in Southeast Asia, Singapore is leading as having the most effective MRV system. So there's quite a lot to be done and quite a lot more to work on. This is good. It's all work in progress. This year and the next year are very crucial for the updates of the NDCs. So there's opportunity for working forward on improving all this and also strengthening the enabling factors. When we look at the next slide, yes, I just want to show you, this is the online tool for GHG emissions inventories that we have developed with the Institute for Global Climate and Environment in Russian Federation. It started and it's developed first for Central Asian countries, and it is covering 4 categories. There's 4 kind of big modules for the training, with practical exercises of and formulas of how to collect the data, how to collect the data for the different sectors. This is the guidelines by sector, going to all the sectors in energy, industry, land use, etc. And it covers also the basic reporting rules, which are different and how they are enhanced, and also what are the requirements for transparency under the Paris Agreement, and the principles of estimating the emissions. So that's a very important chapter, because wherever there is not enough data, how this could be estimated and recalculated, recalibrated. So I believe with this we are, sorry about that, I've been 10 minutes over my time. Apologies for that. I think this is the last slide. We look forward to work with you for raising our climate ambition in our region, because our region is contributing with the highest contribution to the global emissions, and we have opportunities here which will create new jobs, stimulate the growth. Especially after this COVID, we need to recover, but let's recover green. Thank you very much, and I look forward for discussion later.
Thank you very much, Aneta, for your informative presentation. Now I would like to turn to the country experiences, and due to the time constraint, I kindly ask speakers to please keep your presentation within the assigned time. And the first country case will be presented by Ms. Chanusakul Supirak, environmental official from the Office of Natural Resources and Environmental Policy and Planning of Thailand. Mike is yours.
Thank you. Could I share my presentation from my side? Could you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Can you share your slides?
No, I cannot share my slide.
Okay, then if you have a problem sharing your slides, we can do that for you.
Oh, but I just updated my slide in the morning.
Okay.
Or if you can see my slide.
Yes, we can see it. Please continue.
Yes, we can see.
Good afternoon, colleague. My name is Chanusakun Supirak. I'm an environmental official from ONET. My responsibility is focused on mitigation policy and measures. It's my pleasure today to share with you about our experience on preparing of the updated NDC. First of all, I would like to introduce Thailand's circumstance. As everyone has already known that Thailand is located in the mainland of Southeast Asia, cover an area around 500,000 kilometers. 47% of total land area is agricultural land. Thailand has the climate change experience that affected because we lack of fully developed water infrastructure and deforestation. During the last decade, Thailand is particularly vulnerable that impacts drought and flood. It's true that vulnerability is the result for several recent extreme climatic events. In 2011, Thailand faced two major flooding that impacted over 13 million people and cost is more than 1.4 trillion Thai baht in economic loss, estimated by the World Bank. In 2015, Thailand also experienced one of the worst drought in decades, leading to critically low levels of water in reservoir countrywide. According to the Sorry, I have some technical problems. Let me fix it.
Ms. Supirak?
I have some problem with my screen.
Well, Ms. Supirak, we can share your presentation slides for you.
Okay.
Okay, UNOSD team, please share. Thank you very much.
Next slide, please. The second slide. The second slide. The previous one. The previous one. Before this slide. No. Okay, this one. According to the Global Climate Risk Index into 2020 by the German Watch, Thailand is ranked the 8th country that most affected by extreme weather events in the last 20 years. Thailand is among developing countries that are highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Thailand's share of the global GHG emission is 0.8% in 2014, which is lower than the world average. In terms of emission profile, the energy sector has been the largest contributor to Thailand's GHG emission, accounting for 72% of total emission in 2016, as reflected in the third biennial updated report. Next, please. We conduct our inventory every year and submit the report to the UNFCCC to 2 year under the BUR and every 4 year under the NC. Thailand undertake its GHG inventory using the Thailand Greenhouse Gas Emission Inventory System, or TGS. to support, which supported by Australian government. This system aims to assist Thai in estimation and achieving the GHG emission following the IPCC guideline in 2006. After we are signing the UNFCCC in 1992, UNEP has been appointed to be our national focal point to the UNFCCC, then the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. Thailand has been implementing the UNFCCC and working on national climate change policy and implementation for 28 years. This is such a long story, so I will cut it short. Let's start with the first yellow box. In 2014, where Thailand put our first greenhouse gas mitigation target as voluntary domestic efforts to contribute 7 to 20% greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2020 below the BAU in the energy and transport sectors. In 2015, the climate change master plan has been launched, and we also submit our first NDC, which is to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 20 to 25% from the BAU by 2030. After that, the NDC roadmap on mitigation has been launched since May 2017. In order to be a framework for relevant agency to achieving the NDC target. The NDC roadmap was developed through participatory process and based on the relevant national plans on energy, transport, industry, and waste management. In 2018, full-line agency, namely the Energy Policy and Planning Office, or EPPO, the Office of Transport and Traffic Policy and Planning, or OTP, and Department of the Industrial Work, or the IW, and the Pollution Control Department, or PCD, you have developed the NDC sectoral action plans on each sector for implementing the NDC roadmap, and the National Committee on Climate Change Policy have approved those action plans. At the same time, NCCC has also approved our first national adaptation plan on NAP to be used as a framework for implementing climate change adaptation in Thailand nationally and subnationally. The NAP prioritizes 6 vulnerable sectors, namely water management, agriculture and food security, tourism, public health, natural resources, and human settlement and security, with key indicators. And last year, Thailand has communicated our updated NDC to the UNFCCC with approval by the NCCC and the Cabinet. Next, please. How can we implement our these plans on as a climate policy agency to try to do to mainstream and integrate the climate measures and targets, including NDC target from our climate plans into plans at all levels. At national level, climate change is currently addressed at the highest policy level under the national strategy to ensure a long-term continuity of the issue alongside other economic and social considerations. The national strategy is to be translated into action through a master plan under national strategy and the 5-year national economics and social development plans, as well as the reform agenda, then the ministries' sectoral action plans, as well as the subnational and local plan have been set according to those national plans. This is to be ensured that climate change will be reflected as national agenda, function-based issue, and area-based issue. Next, please. Our first NDC target that Thailand summit in 2015, the first NDC was formulated based on the national plan, which approved or in the pipeline for approval by the cabinet at the time. In addition, it also consistent with the philosophy of sufficiency, economy, and principle of the sustainable development. And also, as I mentioned, our NDC will be continue on the NAMA activity or our pre-2020 effort. According to our current recent data of the 2018, we have implemented our NAMA with an achievement of approximately 16% GHG emission reduction from energy sector. This is to show that the mitigation measure in energy sector played a big role to achieve our voluntary target of 7% reduction from the BAU in 2020. This would lay a solid foundation for our work in the post-2020s. Next, please. The NDC development process began with the potential GHG emission reduction study in our sectors, include agriculture and LULUCF. The study provides essential information for policymakers to set the NDC target, the analysis and abatement potential of the greenhouse gas emission presents potential measures, and help us to shape a mitigation policy. This is let me go back to the previous slide. This figure will show you the NDC roadmap on mitigation since Thailand pledged the reduction target for the post-2020. We have to work on identifying the agency to allocate the national target into sectoral level by setting up our working group under the subcommittee on policy and planning integration. All stakeholders be able to participate in public hearing or national consultation before send the draft roadmap to the national committee to consider, and after that, it was tabled to the cabinet to approve at the final step. The NDC roadmap has identified primary mitigation measures, including energy efficiency improvement, substitution of the renewable energy in the power generation, manufacturing industry, transportation, buildings, and residential. The substitution of the clinker substance in the cement industry, substitution of the refrigerant substance, improve the waste management as well as the wastewater treatment, and so on. Several of the measures we identify in the NDC roadmap will be further elaborated in the sectoral action plan. The detailed mitigation analysis was considered during the NDC roadmap formulation to identify key measures and allocate emission reduction target and responsibility to relevant agency within each sector. Next slide, please. As for our experience on the updating NDC, ONEP has established the ad hoc working group on updating NDC for preparing the Thailand updated NDC. The stakeholder consultation were conducted through the interministerial working group on the Naturebased negotiation, the subcommittee on the climate change negotiation and international cooperation, and the subcommittee on the climate change policy and planning integration. This working group and subcommittees comprise the representative from relevant sectoral agency, academia, and private sector. We also had a consultation with four focal point agency about the NDC target. We already include NDC target in their plans. For example, the Power Development Plan and Alternative Energy Development Plan. They are in the process of implementing the NDC sectoral action plans, as well as preparing the MRV process with the relevant agency. Moreover, the economic crisis due to the COVID-19 has affected every country in the world. So it has affected the investment in renewable energy and energy efficiency, and the NDC implementation might not go as planned. The four focal point agencies see that our target should be realistic, achievable. So they agreed to communicate our national efforts on achieving the target of our first NDC. Our updated NDC has been approved by the National Committee on Climate Change Policy and the Cabinet. And as I mentioned before, Thailand has communicate our updated NDC to the UNFCCC last year. Next slide, please. The updated NDC provide information up to date and in line with the current situation. The NDC guidance was used as a framework for revising our first NDC. There are four main components of our updated NDC. The first is the introduction. The introduction explains the background and this reason for updating our NDC and refer to the relevant decisions. The second is a mitigation component. This component provides key information in our NDC, such as target type, scope, and coverage, planning processes and assumption and methodology, and etc. The guidance on information to facilitate clarity, transparency, and understanding, or CTU, was applied in the process of the revisions. The third is adaptation component. This component addresses main information in the National Adaptation Plan or NAP, such as objectives, consistency, and linkage with the Thailand Climate Change Master Plan and Sustainable Development Goals, planning processes, sectors, and its target. And the last one is support needs that identify the needs to be supported in four main areas: policy implementation, technology development and transfer, and mechanism and instruments. And the last one is climate information and M&E system. That's all for my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for sharing Thailand's experience. Our next speaker is Mr. Arif Gohir, Principal Scientific Officer, Global Change Impact Study Center in Pakistan. Mr. Gohir, mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Kim. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So, is my screen visible?
Yes, we can see your screen, but you can make it full screen.
Is it okay now?
So can you start your slideshow?
Yep.
Yes, excellent.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. So, dear all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on wherever you are. I'm thankful to the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development, Thailand Greenhouse Gas Management Organization, and Greenhouse Gas Inventory and Research Center of Korea, the organizers of this virtual conference, for inviting me to participate and share my thoughts on the aspects of the greenhouse gas inventories and NDC preparation and implementation processes in the country. Uh, as I have been introduced, I'm a principal scientist, basically an agronomist working as the head agriculture and coordination at GCISE and also looking after the communications and NDC secretariat at GCISE. GCISC, the Global Change Impact Studies Center, is basically a dedicated research institute for climate change studies in the country, which is mandated for national level research effort, capacity building, policy analysis, information dissemination, and assistance to national planners and policymakers on the issues related to the past and projected climate changes in the country and their likely impacts on the various social economic sector of the economy. The center helped devise adaptation and mitigation strategies in the country as well. The center serves as we have a dedicated ministry for climate change, and the center serves as the research arm of that very ministry. It hosts the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory and NDC Secretariat and supports the Ministry of Climate Change in the preparation of the national communications as well. As you know, Pakistan is basically a climate vulnerable country. We can say this is a sort of unique country with tropical summers and polar winters. But over time, the summers are increasing and the winters are shrinking. There are urban flooding issues. The past historical events bear a testimony to the havocs of climate change in the country in the terms of recurrent floods after 2010 and some weird droughts in the country. Pakistan is having less than 1% share in the greenhouse gas inventory, but as I already mentioned, it's basically a vulnerable country. And the German Watch report has included it in one of the vulnerable countries. In fact, it's included among the 3 countries which ever remained on the list of the German Watch. Despite of these, Pakistan being the responsible member of the global committee has responded well and articulated its climatic change agenda, addressing the mitigation as its priority. As far as the greenhouse gas inventory management is concerned, mostly till now the country prepares the greenhouse gas inventories on the basis of as and when desired. So far, we have prepared 5 greenhouse gas inventories. The first ever was prepared in 1994. Then it was prepared in 2008, and 2012, and 2015. All of these inventories were prepared using the IPCC 1996 guidelines. Actually, the inventory prepared by 2015 by my center, the Global Change Impact Studies Center, fed the Pakistan's first nationally determined contribution as well as to the second national communication. Now we are in the process of preparing, not only preparing, rather finalization of the latest greenhouse gas inventory, and this time it is being prepared using the 2006 IPCC guideline. As far as the structure of or institutional arrangements for the greenhouse gas inventory management are concerned, basically Ministry of Climate Change is the national focal ministry for all this endeavor, and GCISC is the national inventory coordinator. We are well aligned with the 4 key sectoral agencies responsible for providing the data, that is Ministry of Energy. And it has a number of institutes which provide us with the data. The institutes are Hydrocarbon Development Institute, which every year produces the energy yearbook. Then National Electric Power Regulatory Authority, NEPRA, OGRA, and so many other divisions. In case of industrial processes and product use data, Ministry of Industry is the focal point which provides GCISC the data on the industrial activity, and the Ministry of Industry is having some of its another departments from which they collect the data and provide it to us. For AFLU, Agriculture, Forestry and Land Use, Ministry of National Food Security is the nodal point, and they publishes every year the data regarding the crops, livestock, and other agriculture related activities. Besides these, we have forest departments in the provinces which are responsible for the forest management and forest related activities. GCISC is well aligned with those. And for waste data, GCISC is linked with the capital development authorities and provincial municipal waste management departments. Once the inventory is prepared, it follows a rigorous review process. And after that process, it goes into the higher or apex tier in the country, which is the Prime Minister Committee on Climate Change, which comprises of the representatives from the key ministries and as well as the chief ministers from the provincial segments. So presently, the inventory which we are preparing has been approved most recently, a few days back, by the Prime Minister Committee on Climate Change. So as far as the methodology, we are using, firstly, first 4 inventories were prepared using the 1996 IPCC guidelines, but this inventory has been prepared using the 2006 IPCC guidelines as per the sectorals classified in the 2006 guidelines. And for this activity, we have used the IPCC software, but again, saying that we mostly follow the tier 1 approach, but we are trying to switch to tier 2 and tier 3 sort of things, and designing our systems and research for having the country specific coefficients for the preparation. The data used for these preparation of inventories is taken from the published documents by the various ministries and organizations of the government of Pakistan. The key sources of the data are the Pakistan Energy Yearbook, Agriculture Statistics Pakistan, Pakistan Economic Survey. These are the 3 documents which are published every year by the government of Pakistan. Besides these, we also take support from different reports which are published from time to time. Then we take help from the national surveys and compendium of the environmental statistics, which are published by the Bureau of Statistics. We mainly cover, till now, cover the 3 main gases: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. And the scope of the inventory is on energy, including transport, IPU, AFLU, and waste. Most recently, the country has also submitted a comprehensive assessment of forest cover using RS and GIS data, and based on that, a FREL document has also been approved by the UNFCCC. We face a lot of challenges. The first ever challenge is the lack of the emission factors. Mostly the tier 1 or the default emission factors are used. Then there are some data issues, that the data is not coherent, data are segregated, not segregated according to the IPCC guidelines. Then we are having gaps in knowledge and skill in understanding the relationship between the processes, especially industrial processes, and emissions related with those. Then we have a lack of centralized activity data collection and compilation in the key sectors. Historical data ever remained a challenge for us, and resources for this inventory preparation is another challenge. But we have planned accordingly to tackle these challenges. We are strengthening our QC and QA procedures, and we are trying to develop inventories on regular basis and trying to develop a GHG inventory management system with the help of the international support. And in this context, we have engaged SciTIPA France for designing such a system for the country, which will not only facilitate in the preparation of the greenhouse gas inventories on regular basis in future, but also will serve as an MRV system for the GHGs. We are well on board with different representative ministries for the development of the tier 2 and tier 3 coefficients in the sectors of energy and agriculture especially. Then coverage of F-gas is also not part of our inventories. We are trying to develop a database, and for the future inventories, we are trying to include F-gases in this as well. Use of remote sensing and GIS data for the GHG inventory is another area on which we are focusing on for the development of future inventories. As far as the nationally determined contributions are concerned, you all know that Pakistan's first ever NDC was submitted in 2016, in which we committed that subject to the availability of the international support, we were committed to reduce 20% of the projected emissions of the 2030, and the asked amount was amounting to 40 billion US dollars. Pakistan is very keen to address the climate challenges. From our own resources, we have invested much in some of the key projects or programs in the country. 10 billion tree tsunami is one of the programs. Under this program, 10 billion trees will be planted in the country in the 5 years from 2020 till 2025. Ecosystem restoration initiative is another area in which the government is doing a lot. We have another initiative on the protected areas. So all the protected areas not only will be kept protected, but also these areas will be increased. Water is another issue for the country because most of the country is arid to semi-arid climate. So we have a program at the national level that is called as Recharge Pakistan. Government has most recently launched an electric vehicle policy under which almost 25% of the vehicles will be transferred or shifted to electric vehicles by the end of the 2030. Then we have the Clean Green Pakistan movement and green economic stimulus, and we have launched programs on mass transit. So these are the key initiatives of the government which we are focusing on. For us, NDC is not merely a document for the fulfilling of the international commitment. It is also objective to provide us the internal estimates for where we are standing in terms of the national emissions, what are we doing, how much money or finance we are spending on mitigation and adaptation actions, and what are the outputs from these actions, and the future strategy, how much resources we can dedicate for the future actions. As far as the NDC enhancement process is concerned, we are almost more than halfway. Ministry of Climate Change is the focal point, GCISC is serving as the secretariat. In order to make the process more inclusive, we have engaged all the federal and provincial organizations pertaining to planning, research, in all the sectors of energy, transport, industries, agriculture, water, health, forestry, etc. And we have also engaged our development partners like Food and Agriculture Organizations, United Nations Development Program, GIZ, World Wildlife Fund for Nature, World Health Organization, UNICEF, and World Bank in this endeavor. So this is, I'm sorry, you may not be able to read through the slide, but just to give you a flavor. So FAO is engaged in the NDC process on the agriculture related activities. WWF is engaged on the forestry related actions. UNDP is involved in the adaptation assessments, marginal abatement calculations, Similarly, WHO and UNICEF are involved in health-related matters, which were not part of our previous NDC. Then GIZ is involved in strengthening the greenhouse gas inventories and the reporting prospects, and we have also included youth as one of the elements to be reflected in the NDC implementation. For the first time, we are also trying to include blue carbon in the national NDC document, for which we have engaged the World Bank. So most of the work under these activities have been completed. The second phase of this NDC process is that we have made 3 committees. First 2 committees are sort of research committees or research synthesis committees or data collection committees. The first one is the adaptation committee, which is led by the Federal Flood Commission. This committee has 7 working groups. These working groups are reflected, or the areas under these working groups are reflected in our national climate change policy, which was approved in 2012. So we have the working groups on water resources, agriculture, human health, disaster preparedness, gender, and biodiversity. Similarly, we have another committee. That committee is called as Mitigation Committee, that is led by Ministry of Energy's department, called as NECA, National Energy Efficiency Authority. Under the Mitigation Committee, we have 5 working groups. These working groups are on energy, agriculture, industrial processes, forestry, and waste. So these committees are working. These working groups have almost finalized their recommendations. We have asked recommendations on 3 aspects. First one is what we have changed so far from 2016 onward that we committed in 2016 in first NDC. And the second is what they envision in the next 10 years, how much or what will be the possible or plausible actions or the projects or programs that we need to include in our adaptation and mitigation commitments. And thirdly, if possible, what will be the financial impact or the resources needed to meet all these activities. So once approved by their respective technical committees, this work will be given to the GCISE, which is serving as the secretariat. Simultaneously, we are in the process of reviewing the reports, as I mentioned earlier, from the development partners. So this report or conciled document will be submitted to the National Steering Committee, which is led by the Minister on Climate Change and comprising of the secretaries from the key ministries and the provincial representatives. Once the document goes through this process, it will be submitted to the Prime Minister Committee on Climate Change, about which I already mentioned. It chaired by the Prime Minister and comprises of the ministers from the key ministries and the chief ministers from all the 6 federating units in the country. We hope to accomplish, there is some delay due to the COVID, but we hope to complete all this setup by the end of or somewhere in the mid-May. One more thing that we are trying to include in this our new NDC is the emissions modeling and the development of the marginal abatement cost curve. This facility, or you can say this capacity, is presently lacking in the country, but with the assistance of the United Nations Development Program, we are in link with the consultants, and so far we have been able to collect the primary and secondary data. We have been able to review our policies, national visions, national plans, sectoral policies, and presently we are in the process of engaging with different stakeholders and for focus group discussions and key informant interviews. Based on that, we will be developing the emission scenarios like business, maybe the business as usual scenario, then policy scenarios, and the mitigation scenario. Once this is done using the different modeling tools or statistical regression equations or the tools like DICE or input-output technique, we will be identifying different mitigation options and will help. These things will help develop our marginal abatement cost curves. We are facing some barriers in this process because this is sort of a new thing. All the provinces and federating units are not on the same page. We have some understanding issues, we have capacity issues, though this time we have made the process more inclusive through the involvement of the representative of the provinces and the key ministries. So gradually we are adding to the understanding and capacities of different organizations. Data availability, quality, consistency, this is another issue that we are facing. Then about coordination, because we have different federating units. They have their own circumstances, they have their own climatology, they have their own visions, how to integrate and collate it for a collective action. And the cross-sector issue is another one. Anyhow, we are trying to cope this challenge through the committees we have formed for the NDC revision process. Then one thing that we have felt that over time, that we have not been able to define a mechanism or framework or for institutional setup for NDC implementation from 2016 till 20. But we, through this process of revision, we are trying to develop simultaneously this setup for future as I already mentioned that it's a new stream of work. Most of the developing countries are lacking skill in institutional strengthening, capacity building, the emission modeling, and scenarios building, capacity in converting the actions into projects for funding. So these are some of the challenges. Pakistan is also facing these challenges. But with the help of dedicated work, with the help of the committees we have formed, and with the assistance of the development partners, we are trying to develop some actions for getting out of these problems. I think this workshop and a similar workshop on these issues, in which the different countries will be sharing their experiences and best practices, we will be able to learn a lot, and we'll try to incorporate these into our new commitments and new actions. Regarding SDG and NDC linkage, so I want to mention here is that Pakistan, no doubt, Pakistan is committed to its obligations under both the agreements. Uh, uh, Most of our national policies have been developed after 2015. So these policies, either I talk about the national water policy, I talk about the national food security policy, renewable energy policies. So we have already embedded SDGs in those policies. But on the policies that we have developed before 2015, we are updating those policies. Likely, we are presently updating our national climate change policy, which was approved in 2012. Similarly, we have most recently attached a national electrical vehicle policy with our national energy policy. So these are the actions we are doing. Um, uh, Ministry of Planning and Development in Pakistan is looking after the SDG related things. And as I mentioned, our policies are already take into account the SDG actions. And our NDC, which we are rightly preparing, will stem from the policies that we have already developed. So I don't see there is any gap or any mismatch between the linkages. So both our commitments through our documents will link each other and will complement each other. Yes, I agree that pandemic has shattered us a lot, but it also provided us with a number of opportunities. We need to work on it. We need to go through it. We need to learn from the experiences of the different countries. Some of the opportunities that I was able to recollect were on generation of the green jobs, preparation of the national decarbonization plans, tree plantations, climate action, and disaster response planning, waste management issues, gender responsive activities, and the involvement of youth. But I will say here that our country is already doing a lot on these things. We have taken some positive steps, and these steps are well recognized by the global international community. Here you can see the tweets or the Facebook related comments from UNDP, from Economic Forum, and different key personalities. So our country has done climate action, number one, on the nature-based solutions, under which we are doing actions on Billion Tree Tsunami, then Ecosystem Restoration Initiative, Protected Area Initiative, and Recharge Pakistan. Similarly, regarding, we have raised the energy-related ambitions for clean energies. We have revised our clean energy targets. We are presently switching our energy from coal to the hydro, and I just talked about the electric vehicle transition. So our government is very keen that this momentum be sustained and boosted. Above indicators and initiatives depict a shifting of the landscape in Pakistan towards a cleaner, greener, and sustainable future, aiming for lowering the emissions and ensuring the climate resilient growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arif Gohir, for your excellent presentation on Pakistan's experience, especially with SDG and NDC linkages. And dear participants, we are getting a lot fewer questions compared to yesterday, so please feel free to leave any questions you might have in the chat box. And next country is Singapore. Let me invite Ms. Alyssa Ng, Senior Manager from the National Climate Change Secretariat of Singapore, as our next speaker.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Yu Jong. Arif, sorry, could you stop sharing your screen, please?
Just,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I believe everyone can see my screen here now.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, lovely. So first of all, hi everyone, good afternoon. I would like to thank the UNOSD and the Thailand Greenhouse Gas Office for inviting Singapore to present on our experience with updating the NDC. My name is Alyssa, and I represent the National Climate Change Secretariat of Singapore. So over the next 20 minutes, I will be addressing these issues. So Singapore's NDC, like most, if not all countries, is based on our national circumstances. In Singapore's case, we face a number of issues that constrain our solution space. First of all, Singapore is a small, low-lying island city-state, and with just 728 square kilometers of land area, we have to accommodate infrastructural developments for 5.6 million plus people, plus commercial centers, transport hubs, etc. So Singapore is thus highly urbanized and densely populated, with limited space for mitigation options such as large solar farms or sequestering carbon underground. Secondly, Singapore's ability to access alternative energy options is constrained by geography, which creates less favorable conditions for the large-scale deployment of hydropower, wind, and geothermal options. Solar energy is Singapore's best option, but even so, we have to manage the intermittency challenge, and there are also space constraints with deploying solar panels. So given our limits with alternative energy, most of our electricity is generated by natural gas, the cleanest type of fossil fuel. Third, with a lack of domestic hinterland and natural resources, Singapore is reliant on a strong export-oriented manufacturing base, producing goods and services for a world market. This also means that our capacity for natural sinks is very limited. Still, we do aim to mitigate the effects of climate change with minimal economic and social disruptions. On the mitigation front, Singapore has been working towards a low-carbon future by addressing our emission streams from all sectors, and we have taken early action, such as switching to natural gas since the early 2000s. As of 2017, most of Singapore's emissions are a result of industrial activities, which are in turn due to the structure of our economy. On the adaptation front, Singapore is enhancing our climate resilience on multiple fronts. As a small island city-state, the threat of rising sea levels and floods are ever present. Other areas of concern to Singapore include water security and drought, vector-borne diseases, food security, and the urban heat island effect. Now, despite our constraints, Singapore has pushed ahead to submit an enhanced NDC. In March last year, Singapore submitted its enhanced NDC together with the Long-Term Low Emissions Development Strategy, or LEDS, on the same day. The enhanced NDC document updates Singapore's climate pledge submitted in July 2015 under the Paris Agreement. Our enhanced NDC now states an absolute emissions target to peak at emissions at 65 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent around 2030. And beyond 2030, our LEDS aspires to halve emissions from its peak to 33 MT CO2e by 2050, with a view to achieving net zero emissions as soon as viable in the second half of the century. Our enhanced NDC and LEDS build on policies and initiatives that we have progressively implemented over the years. And to enable Singapore's low carbon transition, we need to first make deep transformations to our infrastructure, economy, and society. Second, tap on innovation in low carbon technologies, such as carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and the use of hydrogen. Third, we need to leverage on international cooperation, such as having a regional energy grid. If the actual reductions from each of these thrusts are larger than we now assess, or the technologies are available sooner than we expect, we can realize our aspiration earlier. On the other hand, if the potential reductions turn out to be less than promising, we will still strive to meet our LDS aspiration to the best of our ability, even though the task has become more difficult. So if you would like to read our LDS submission, you can scan the QR code on the right of the screen. To transform our industry, economy, and society to reduce emissions and to improve our competitiveness, we have put in place measures across all sectors to improve our energy efficiency, shift away from higher emitting activities, and reduce waste generated. You can read more about these initiatives either in the LDS or on the presentation, which will be uploaded to the UNOSD's website later. So complementing these sectoral measures is our comprehensive carbon tax, which covers 80% of Singapore's carbon emissions. Our carbon tax, which is the first carbon pricing scheme in Southeast Asia, was implemented since 2019. This carbon tax provides an economy-wide price signal to encourage greenhouse gas emissions reductions where it makes the most economic sense. We will be reviewing the trajectory and the level of the carbon tax post-2023 in consultation with industry and expert groups. We seek a carbon tax level that will incentivize companies to switch to carbon-friendly products, services, and activities while promoting industry innovation and new green growth. Hearing from the experiences of our friends here and also reading from the submissions of other parties, we note that there are multiple ways for parties to enhance the NDCs. So the World Resources Institute has summarized this quite nicely. Broadly speaking, an NDC can be enhanced by raising the mitigation ambition, updating or adding information on adaptation, elaborating on actions to strengthen implementation, as well as enhancing clarity, transparency, and understanding of the NDC. The next two slides here highlight our NDC enhancements compared to our INDC submitted in 2015. Under the Paris Agreement, countries are expected to move over time towards an absolute emissions reduction target and to peak global emissions as soon as possible. Our enhanced NDC here reflects a shift from an intensity target to an absolute emissions limitation target, which is also a peaking target. Previously, our INDC stated that we would stabilize our emissions with the aim of peaking around 2030. We now have a clear peaking level at 65 million tons of CO2e, which we intend to achieve around 2030. This will hence give the international community a clearer assurance of the level and when Singapore's emissions are expected to peak, and we hope that it will facilitate the tracking of progress. We've also expanded the coverage of greenhouse gas emissions under the NDC to include a seventh greenhouse gas, nitrogen trifluoride, which we mainly use for semiconductor manufacturing, and we will address this new emission stream within the same peak emission ceiling. Apart from the constraints imposed by our limited alternative energy options and the inclusion of NF3, We will also need to create room for energy demands from new activities, such as from new commercial and industrial enterprises, and new growth areas such as data centers. Achieving our enhanced NDC will hence be challenging and will require greater effort from all sectors. Apart from enhancing our mitigation ambition, we have also improved on our methodological approaches with the use of 2006 IPCC guidelines and the global warming potential values from the IPCC's fifth assessment report. We have also provided new implementation details, including more ambitious solar energy goals, information on our new carbon tax, and also the exemptions for carbon facilities, and also details on the sectoral measures. And of course, like most other countries as well, we've also applied the Katowice guidance on information for clarity, transparency, and understanding, or ICTU, as a template for information on our NDC. I will now explain how Singapore approached the NDC update and LDS development process. Climate change is a complex challenge, and reviewing our international commitments took a whole of government process, which is steered by the Interministerial Committee on Climate Change, or IMCCC. The IMCCC is chaired by our senior minister and includes the ministers of the agencies listed on the right of the slide. The IMCCC is supported by an executive committee comprising the permanent secretaries of the respective ministries. The executive committee oversees the work of 5 working groups looking at long-term emissions and mitigation, resilience, sustainability, green economy, as well as communications and engagement. The IMCCC and EXCO are supported by the National Climate Change Secretariat, which is my office, which is part of the Prime Minister's office. To coordinate issues related to domestic MRV, agencies also formed the MRV Task Force, which oversees an interagency working group tasked with preparing our national communications and biennial update reports. These 2 units are under the supervision of the Long-Term Emissions and Mitigation Working Group. The process of updating our NDC and preparing the LDS was staffed by my colleagues and I in the National Climate Change Secretariat. Given the clear link between the NDC updating process and the LDS development in the Paris Agreement ambitious cycle, we took a single holistic exercise for both processes. In particular, we saw the LDS as a reference to inform subsequent NDCs, so it was imperative for us to consider our LEDS when we were enhancing our NDC. Our LEDS and NDC enhancement were based on our national policy framework, taking into account our national circumstances, the mitigation potential from emerging technologies and international cooperation, and our consultations with key stakeholders. As I've mentioned earlier, the Long-Term Emissions and Mitigation Working Group provides the whole of government planning framework to plan and track our mitigation actions. To prepare our targets, we referred to the technology roadmaps on the mitigation potential of low-carbon technologies, other independent studies, and feedback from our consultations with the public and stakeholders. We developed our enhanced NDC and LEDS aspiration through a comprehensive multi-year study involving key stakeholders. Our approach was to consider the potential mitigation measures in terms of cost effectiveness and practicability over the medium and long term. The relevant government agencies worked together to iteratively evaluate possible mitigation options in terms of cost effectiveness and practicability. A recursive dynamic numerical model, the MARCEL, was used to simulate possible mitigation pathways based on the possible technology options available to Singapore in the light of our national circumstances. The MARCEL, for colleagues who are not familiar with it, is a widely used recursive dynamic numerical model for the economic analysis of various energy-related systems over a period of several decades. Similar to Korea, and also as my colleague from Pakistan has shared, Singapore also used a MAC curve to map the cost of mitigation options against their abatement potential. This modeling exercise referenced several technology roadmaps, and these roadmaps include areas such as CCUS, green data centers, industry energy efficiency, and solar photovoltaics. We started developing some of these roadmaps as early as in 2014, and we consulted widely with local and international experts in the private sector and in academia. For example, we published the first solar PV study in 2014, and we published an updated study in conjunction with the Solar Energy Research Institute of Singapore in January last year to assess Singapore's technical potential for solar deployment. So taking into account Singapore's national circumstances, the urgency of global climate action, and the inputs from the above processes, these considerations served as the basis for preparing our enhanced NDC and LADS. So as mentioned earlier, we used the Katowice ICTU guidance as a template to provide information on our NDC in the clearest manner possible. As I mentioned, we did a multi-year study to develop our NDC and our LADS, so this has been an ongoing process. One of the key milestones that we had was the publication of our National Climate Change Strategy in 2012. This was to outline our plans to address climate change before we even submitted an NDC, before the concept even happened in the first place. We also sought to update the public on our sustainability roadmap through the second Sustainable Singapore Blueprint. And as I've mentioned, we also had a number of technology roadmaps developed as early as in 2014. Prior to submitting our INDC in 2015, the government also conducted consultations with the public and other stakeholders. And once we had submitted our INDC and the Paris Agreement was ratified, we published a climate action plan in 2016 on mitigation and adaptation to share a strategy for meeting our original NDC. And in the meantime, we've also had some new and updated technology roadmaps, and we implemented our carbon tax. Given the broader implications of the LDS, including its impact on our NDC enhancement process, we also conducted public consultations on the LDS, and I will elaborate on that in the next slide. Within the same time frame, we have also regularly submitted our national communication and biennial update reports under the UNFCCC, which include regular updates to our national greenhouse gas inventories. Our fourth BUR was submitted last December. On our most recent set of public consultations, they were held between July and September 2019 on the potential long-term low emissions strategies for Singapore. We received over 2,000 responses from the public, businesses, and other organizations. And these agencies and entities offered many suggestions on what we could do to reduce our emissions. We had several engagement sessions between August 2019 and January 2020 to facilitate in-depth discussion with experts and stakeholders across multiple sectors, which include transport, industry, buildings, info communications, and logistics. In the light of our enhanced NDC and LDS, we wanted to work towards a stronger vision for Singapore to be a global city of sustainability. And just last month, we announced the Singapore Green Plan 2030. The Green Plan reflects the Singapore's government's aspirations and commitment towards sustainable development. Many Singaporeans, especially the young Singaporeans, are motivated and particularly energized by this vision, and they want to play a more active role. So as you can see on this slide, we have set out several targets for the Green Plan, classified under 5 key pillars of city in nature, sustainable living, energy reset, green economy, and a resilient future. The public sector will also lead the national effort by setting an example, placing a peaking target on the public sector's carbon emissions around 2035, and using various tools and levers to encourage our partners and citizens to be more sustainable. In the process of enhancing our NDC, we encountered 2 main challenges. First, while the Katowice ICTU guidelines were developed to facilitate clarity, transparency, and understanding, translating our NDC enhancement using the tables required some finesse on our part. Some fields weren't exactly applicable for Singapore, and we had to explain why NA was indicated for those fields. We also chose to have an absolute emissions target to provide more predictability and transparency. And since the Katowice guidance was in a tabular format, we kept the implementation details as succinct as possible and avoided duplicating the information by cross-referencing other documents where further details could be found. So for example, we cross-referenced previous documents such as our climate action plans that were published in 2016. And of course, just like many other countries as well, with Decision 1 CP21's deadline of communicating the NDC update, we sought to try and communicate our enhanced NDC by the first quarter of 2020. Unfortunately, that kind of coincided with the outbreak of COVID-19, and we had to finalize the NDC enhancement and the LLDS despite the uncertainties that we faced going into the pandemic. Nonetheless, while we, like other governments, sought to suppress the outbreak and prepare for economic recovery, we remain committed to supporting global climate action and to move towards a low carbon and climate resilient future. We managed to meet our target to submit both documents on 31st March 2020, which serve to guide our future developments and to continue this transition to a low carbon economy. It was a very challenging occasion for Singapore, and in particular for my team and I, but we hope that as more countries emerge from the pandemic and start to consider green recovery plans, they will embark on the NDC updating process as a way to strengthen the momentum of global climate action. Having gone through this process of enhancing our NDC and preparing our LLDS, it was clear to us that these two mechanisms for driving climate ambition were useful for galvanizing the whole of government and whole of nation towards a common aspiration of a low carbon and climate resilient future, even amidst new challenges. While we may not have the answers to achieving a low carbon economy at this time, the LLDS is a growing work stream that will take into account our growing experience, technology developments, and enhancements in international cooperation. So when we consider how we would undertake this process and we looked at how other parties had done so, we noted that there is a no one-size-fits-all approach to the NDC enhancement or to the LLDS. Everyone seemed to have a different focus, and everyone seemed to interpret or understand the national circumstances in a different way to produce these documents. International cooperation is a key element to achieve our enhanced NDC and LDS, and we believe that collaborations can create win-win partnerships to overcome constraints. Preparing these submissions, especially in the light of recent global events, they emphasize the importance of having effective institutional arrangements to coordinate our climate strategy, prepare our technical work in advance, and engaging our stakeholders to ensure that the LDS and NDC were national strategies and not just government plans created in the vacuum. So with that, I conclude my presentation and I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alisa, for your excellent presentation. We have a couple questions for you in the chat box, and you will have a chance to respond to them later in the discussion session. And today's last presentation is from Nepal. Please welcome Mr. Raju Sapkota, Undersecretary of Ministry of Forests and Environment in Nepal.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Unfortunately, we encountered power cut, and that's why I cannot share my screen from my laptop, and I am getting help from the team. First of all, I would like to thank you, UNOSD, to provide this opportunity to share our experiences and lessons learned during the process of updating our nationally determined contribution. Please, next slide. Yeah, this is the presentation background. First of all, I will cover one slide regarding country's background, and then our main targets in our updated NDC, which we have submitted in December 2020, and types of mitigation targets that we have submitted, and our adaptation priorities that is communicated through our NDC, and the process we followed during the enhancement of NDC, and experiences and lessons learned, and what we are planning for the successful implementation of the NDC and our long-term low emission strategy. Next slide, please. As you know, Nepal is very small mountainous country, and it covers only 0.39% of global population. And regarding the greenhouse gas emission, Nepal shares only 0.027% of the global emission. But Nepal is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. It is 4th ranking, and especially the mountain region in our country are more vulnerable to the global warming due to climate change. About 1.8 degrees centigrade increase in between 1975 to 2006. It is the study report, and annual temperature increasing by 0.06 degree centigrade. This is from NAPA report 2010. Next slide, please. And our key sectors that are vulnerable to climate change are water resources and energy, similarly forest biodiversity and watershed management, agriculture and food security, urban settlements and infrastructures, public health, sanitation, and climate-induced hazards, disasters, tourism, natural and cultural heritage are the most vulnerable sectors due to climate change in our country. Next slide, please. Yeah, regarding our 2020 NDC, the main target, we want to expand our clean energy generation to 15,000 megawatt with 5 to 10% solar, wind, and micro hydro and bioenergy. It is the increase from current baseline level of 1,400 megawatt to 15,000, and it is all the clean energy. And similarly, by 2030, we want to ensure 15% of the total energy demand supplied from clean energy sources. Similarly, regarding the transport sector, by 2030, increase sales of electric vehicles to cover 90% of all private passenger and 60% of all four-wheeler public passenger vehicle. And this target will reduce emission from a projected business as usual scenario of 3,640 gigagram CO2 equivalent to 2,619 gigagram CO2 equivalent, which is around 28% decrease in emission. Similarly, through our NDC, we want to adopt low emission technologies in brick and cement industries to reduce coal consumption and air pollution. Similarly, in Apollo sector, regarding our sustainable forest management, we want to maintain 45% of the total area of the country under forest cover. And through our NDC, we aims to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050, and we are currently working on the development of our long-term strategy. Similarly, we want to build resilience and adaptation, and gender equity and social inclusion is also the priority for our NDC, and we want to ensure 25% of households use electric stoves as their primary mode of cooking. These are the major emission-related targets in our NDC. And regarding the type of mitigation targets, we followed 2006 IPCC guideline, and energy, Apollo, waste, and IPPU sector are analyzed and targeted. And in energy, we focused on renewable energy, e-mobility, and e-cooking. Similarly, in Apollo, the quantified target is only for forestry, but we have policy targets for agriculture, livestock, and other sectors also. Similarly, in waste, we have quantified targets regarding sewage treatment. I can read from here that 380 million liters per day of wastewater is being treated before being discharged to natural system, and 60,000 cubic meter per year of facial sludge will be managed, and this will reduce 250 gigagram CO2 equivalent as compared to business as usual. This is the target for waste management. Next slide, please. Yeah, I already.
Mr. Raju Sakota, are you there? We cannot hear you. Mr. Raju Sapkota, can you please respond? I think Mr. Raju Sapkota has lost his internet connection. Yeah, I think he left the meeting room. So I think unfortunately we'll have to move on due to the time constraint.
Hello, hello.
Oh,
hello.
okay, we can hear you now.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Sorry for the network problem. Yeah, sorry.
That's fine. Please continue.
The previous slide, please. Yeah, okay. Go to the next slide. Regarding the adaptation priorities communicated in our NDC, currently we are working on the preparation of our national adaptation plan, and we will communicate our national adaptation plan by June 2021. And some key adaptation priorities that the NDC highlight includes are prepare and implement climate resilient and gender responsive adaptation plans for all local units, establishment of appropriate institutional mechanisms and strategies to monitor impacts of climate change on health, introduce public weather service and early warning systems. These are the key things that we highlighted in our NDC regarding our adaptation priorities. Next slide, please. And the process that we followed during the enhancement of our NDC, we build ownership at national and sub-national level through organizing many stakeholder consultations in national level as well as in sub-national level. Similarly, we review and update existing target policies and measures, and we also align our targets with SDG goals. We also incorporated new sectors for greenhouse gases. And in our updated NDC, we also try to calculate the cost for NDC implementation and investment opportunities. And also we mentioned about monitoring the progress and strength and transparency thing. And methodology of choosing 2020 NDC targets, relevant documents we analyze. And regarding these documents, 15th National Plan, I already mentioned our Sustainable Development Goal National Framework and Action Plan. Similarly, we also reviewed our climate change and environmental policies, sectoral policies, strategies, sectoral plans. Similarly, provincial periodic plans and white papers and annual budgets of line ministries were analyzed during the preparation of targets for this is our enhanced NDC. And we also apply some modeling for the analysis. We use LEAP model, low emission analysis platform model. And finally, we did the experts and stakeholder consultation. A team of experts working group was formed to finalize the NDC draft. And then that draft report was circulated to all the line ministries. And also this is publicly, we publicly announced for the written and verbal comments through our ministry's web portal. And then finally, after getting suggestions from communities, different stakeholders, we finalized our NDC, and we get the views from line ministries also, written comments from line ministries, and we sent the document to the cabinet of the ministries, and cabinet of the ministry approved the document, and we submitted the updated NDC to UNFCCC. Next slide, please. So I already mentioned a lot of consultative process was adopted, and our NDC formulation was a country-driven process following the principle of leave no one behind. Local people, women, indigenous people, and youth are consulted well during the preparation of our NDC. A team of experts reviewed overarching and sectoral policies. Next slide, please. So what lessons we learned during the preparation of our NDC? Around 30 plus vertical, virtual and in-person consultation at central and provincial level help build vertical alignment. Because we were doing our provincial consultation at the same time the pandemic, COVID pandemic occurred, and we need to stop our physical consultation and then we moved to virtual consultation. Similarly, synergy with existing policies and SDG targets help build horizontal alignment. So through our national and provincial consultation, we build the vertical alignment, and through the analysis of existing policies and SDG targets and our periodic plan targets, we build the horizontal alignment. Similarly, modeling exercise, data analysis and assessment to set targets help inform setting target for 2020 NDC. Stakeholder buy-in and policy relevance helped build both vertical and horizontal alignment. Considerations while selecting NDC targets include synergy with existing policy, maximize co-benefit, cost effectiveness, and gender and social inclusion. Next slide, please. So this is the final slide from my side. Currently, we are preparing our NDC implementation plan framework. We are currently working on it regarding how we are implementing our NDC and communicating our transparency regarding the NDC implementation. Similarly, as I already mentioned, we are also working on developing long-term net zero emission strategy. MRV framework is being prepared now. Knowledge retention mechanism at universities are also in preparation. We already have prepared e-cooking and e-mobility sector assessment reports. Mitigation assessment report is being prepared covering all quantified targets, including NDC costing and economic analysis. So we are aligned with Paris Agreement, and our NDC is more ambitious as compared to our initial NDC. However, our priority is adaptation with mitigation co-benefit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. Now we will proceed to a discussion and Q&A session. I would like to ask the speakers from yesterday and today to get ready to participate in this discussion. Professor Seung-Jik Yoo from Sookmyung Women's University in Korea has kindly accepted to facilitate this discussion. Professor Yoo, if you are ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Seung-Jik Yoo, the moderator of these discussion sessions. But I found that we have very limited time. So first, I want to have the Q&A session. So can I invite Mr. Sergei Konorov to respond to the yesterday questions?
Yeah, sure, but I'm not sure whether I see one question which was asked, which is, what do you think about the idea or concept of carryover that some global North leader put forward? I assume it sounds like it's trying to curb the pressure from Paris Agreement commitment. If there are other questions, please remind me. But for this particular one, I actually, well, let me be frank. I don't know what some global North leader means and who is implied. And the concept of carryover has very many meanings. If the question relates to the ongoing negotiations under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, I think there what is being discussed by parties is the transition between the CDM in particular and the market mechanisms introduced by the Paris Agreement. And that transition, as part of that transition, parties discuss the transition of methodologies and structures, the transition of projects and activities, and the transition of units generated under the Kyoto Protocol regime. And this discussion, I cannot say that there is some North leader participating or putting forward some ideas. I think the discussion is truly global. Developed and developing countries have their perspectives on each of these transition issues. So the negotiations are difficult, but I cannot really, unless I misunderstood the question, I cannot really associate one issue just with some global North leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Or then, can I invite Richard Victor Palmer to respond to the question raised by our colleague from Mongolia?
Thank you, Professor Song Jikyu. So to answer the question raised yesterday by Ms. Davasa Ambu from Mongolia, the question is, how do you conduct QA and QC plan? For QA and QC, the Philippines intends to conduct the guidance document that will lay the institutional arrangement, processes, and detailed work based on the available reference documents like the ETF, Enhanced Transparency Framework, and IPCC guidelines. In addition, we will also take into consideration the existing QA, QC processes of the lead government agencies tasked to do the sectoral inventories. Moreover, as discussed in the presentation yesterday, the Philippines, with the support of the UNFCCC Secretariat and FAO, initiated the first QA/QC of the 2010 National Inventory Report of the Philippines last May 2019. And we plan also to use this QA/QC for the next inventory cycle, which will be the 2015 and 2020, and that we will commence the discussion with the lead sectoral agencies, hopefully this month, on this QA/QC. Thank you.
Thank you. Then can I invite Alisa Nung to respond to 3 questions raised by our colleagues in this workshop?
Sure, of course, Sanjay, thank you for the invitation. So I'll address them in order. So the impact of moving from the 1996 guidelines to 2006 guidelines, on our inventory itself, the impact was minimal, I must say. But in terms of the impact on our update on our base year emissions and baseline target, our new enhanced NDC doesn't have a base year or a baseline set of emissions. In fact, we've moved to an absolute emissions peaking target. So in that sense, I suppose there is no implication on our base year because we no longer track on the aspect of it. So next question, can I also share Singapore's MRV system? That itself actually takes a whole other presentation. So in that sense, maybe if I could just briefly share, I know we don't have much time, but maybe I'll just briefly share what our MRV framework is. Give me a moment, please. I'll just share my, oh, sorry, okay, thanks. Just let me share my screen here. Okay, so you've already known our institutional arrangements. Okay, so the MRV task force that we have here, over I think it's 14 agencies here. Basically, it's an MRV task force. It's co-chaired by 2 agencies, which is my office. I'm the main one staffing this MRV TF, and also from the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment. So with all these agencies here, we are split into 4 categories of how we look at the information that we need to collect and report on. So first is water waste in the environment. So indicators like our water use, waste management, waste processes, implications on the environment like air quality. In economic industry, we look at our economic activities, the industrial outputs that form our emissions. Infrastructure and forestry, we look at our built environment, we look at our residential, commercial buildings, etc., and our land use area. And of course, finally, we look at elements related to international cooperation, like capacity building in that instance. So MRV process-wise, this information is also available in our biennial update reports. But basically, the sectoral lead agencies need to collect the data based on the determined process indicators, methodologies, and assumptions kindly developed already by the IPCC. So at least that bit is clear. We go through some QA/QC processes through internal checks and the long-term emissions and mitigation working group secretariat. We consolidated the data, and then based on this data, which shows us the emissions levels of the country, we can then determine whether we meet our pledge or not. This slide just shows the inventory preparation process. Again, more details are available in our fourth biennial update report, which you can find on the National Climate Change Secretariat website and also on the UNFCCC website for our biennial update reports. So I hope that just shares, broadly speaking, what our MRV process is. Okay, and I understand you had also, so that was Ursula's question. I understand there's a question on the challenges we have implementing our carbon tax. So challenges-wise, we sought to first, because ultimately it's a carbon tax levied on the big emitters. So we make sure to have regular consultations and engagements with the key stakeholder groups before we implemented the carbon tax. And we announced the implementation of our carbon tax, I think, a few years, since I think it was since 2016, we started consulting companies. So that was 3 years before we even implemented the carbon tax. So we wanted to make sure that we consulted the affected carbon companies to explain the need for the carbon tax and also on the MRV requirements. So they will be very clear on what information is required from them. And this is a challenge for them in that aspect because they were already required to report information on a separate platform, which is on the Energy Conservation Act. So as a result, to overcome this key challenge of ours, we built the MRV requirements for the Carbon Pricing Act on the existing requirements, the reporting platform, and the templates already used under the Energy Conservation Act. So these carbon tax liable companies are already familiar with the existing framework. In that sense, we help to reduce the administrative burden and confusion for the companies. So the implementation was a bit smoother on that aspect. There's also a question, sorry if you don't mind, a question on how are ideas and innovations prioritized for integration. So it depends on the different working groups that we have under the IMCCC platform. So each working group has their own priorities and their own work plan. So because these working groups are tasked with presenting a work plan, and we clear at the Interministerial Committee every year, we ensure that there's a lot of checks and balances between the working groups to show that these plans and priorities are being put up and approved collectively. So at least it's a whole coordinated approach to that aspect. I see a question in the chat. Sonjit, do you mind? Should I address that as well?
Oh, that's it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Also, can I invite Mr. Lajos Sepkatara to answer the question?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Regarding the question, how we engage the stakeholders and how our adaptation plans are gender responsive, how can we assure all these things? Regarding this, let me clear something. We have already formulated our national climate change policy in 2019. And in national climate change policy, we have recognized 12 thematic sectors which are important in Nepal for the issue of climate change adaptation and mitigations. Among these 12 sectors, 8 are the major sectors and 4 are cross-cutting sectors. And this JC, climate finance, governance, capacity building, awareness, these are the cross-cutting sectors that are identified in Climate Change Policy 2019 of Nepal. And we already have formulated our JCN Climate Change Action Plan. And currently we are working on the preparation of our National Adaptation Plan. And during the formulation of this National Adaptation Plan, this JCN Climate Change Action Plan is also equally reviewed, and as per the recommendation of that action plan, we will formulate our National Adaptation Plan regarding how we can make it gender responsive. And similarly, for the stakeholder engagement, we have many formal and informal mechanisms for the stakeholder involvement. Regarding the formal mechanism, we have National Council for Climate Change and Environment Protection, chaired by the Honorable Prime Minister. And similarly, we have Interministerial Climate Change Coordination Committee in federal level. And similarly, we have provincial level Climate Change Coordination Committee in provincial level regarding the coordination with stakeholders in different level regarding the climate change actions in our country. I think and regarding what are some of the strategies Nepal is using to finance its NDC and green development strategy, we are currently working on developing our climate change roadmap, climate finance roadmap. And that climate finance roadmap will guide us how we can align our NDC and green recovery after this COVID pandemic. That framework will guide us to develop our future strategy regarding this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I also found that there are two more questions to Singapore. So can I invite Alice Allen again to answer those questions?
Hi,
Thank you.
Sandrich. Yeah, sure. No worries. Okay, so maybe I'll first share our experience with developing our long-term strategy with the NDC update. I'm looking at how, like, process-wise, how we did it, right? We did both of these things in tandem. So basically, while one team looked at the NDC update process and mapped out the technology options available up to 2030, and also our emission streams and projects and activities investments up to 2030. Another team at the same time also looked up to 2050. What were the technology options open to us to abate our emissions in the longer term? So I can give an example. CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, tends to be a more long-term project. So that was the kind of considerations we took in place. They took place in tandem. We got them approved in our cabinet in tandem, like together at the same time. So that allows the sort of like, yeah, we did it both in tandem in the same team, just different, in the same unit, just different teams. So that was how we coordinated with agencies. So all the government agencies knew at one go what the National Climate Change Secretary was set out to do. So in a way, they can't say that they were confused or they didn't know our goal, because we made it very clear what the end goals were, which is to prepare the NDC update and also prepare the LDS. So I think that joining or forcing the two processes together to prepare an administrative and bureaucratic process helped us a lot in galvanizing the kind of whole of government preparation. So how is the carbon tax implemented in our country? So basically, for the carbon tax, the taxable facilities are only for facilities and industries that are emitting more than 25 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions annually. So for these companies, they'll be priced at 5 Singapore dollars per ton from 2019 to 2023. So this is an interim pricing. As I mentioned also, we will review the carbon tax rate by 2023 to increase it to a slightly higher rate. So how we implement it is that each of these companies are required to submit their inventory plans on our emissions data monitoring and analysis system. So this is a platform that they use to report their emissions. We also set it very clearly out in the website of the implementing agency, which is the National Environment Agency, on introduction to GHG MRV for the taxable facilities, how to submit the monitoring plan, how to use the emissions data systems, etc. So we set those out very clear online. So that was how we could implement the carbon tax. And with that, we are also using it to monitor the collection of our tax. So at this time, before anyone asks how much carbon tax do you collect in 2019, to be honest, we're not sure yet because we're still compiling the data that we got because the year only just ended for us in that sense for FY 2020. So we're still working on that. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. And we have one more question regarding the carbon point system in Korea. I could answer this question, but we have the expert who is the head of the UNOSD and the former vice minister of the Ministry of the Environment. And I think he the one who developed this system when he was the director, I think, in the ministry. So can I invite Chun-Gyu back to answer this question? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Yu. I'm happy to answer the carbon point system that was, designed more than 10 years ago as, incentives, incentives to the people who, who do the environmental friendly lives. For example, when you use the best transportation facilities like metro and buses, if you have a green card, green credit card system, then whenever you use the transportation system, your bonus will be acclimated automatically in your green carbon point system. Another example, when you save the electricity and save the water at your home, then the local government calculated how much you saved electricity and water. Then you just give you are awarded some kind of point, and if you got some amount of points, you can use the point as like the cashes and some kind of, you have free to enter the some national palace and other things. That kind of system is point was calculated automatically using credit card and other systems to collecting the data. So I think it's something very interesting system that was recognized by the system has been recognized by the OECD, and that carbon point system was awarded the medal for the green livelihood, green life. That is called. Okay, I think it's I think that is my answer. So maybe I don't know, but you can do all things, but that is invented to promote green life in their life. Okay, that is my answer.
Thank you everybody for raising questions and answering the questions. And is there any other person or participant who wish to make any comment or raise questions? So if you have, please press the response icon in the bottom of your screen. Do we see any hands? No. Okay. If that is the case, then I will close our discussions there. But personally, I recognized a lot of progress made in preparation of the national inventory and also in preparation of the NDCs. But as you know, the setting the national target is not the end of our work. We in our transparency framework on the Paris Agreement, we need to report, we need to monitor the progress of the implementations, and also we need to report the biannual transparency report starting in the year of 2024. So we have a lot of work ahead, and also in that aspect, this kind of the training workshop is very important, and it is the necessary one. So I hope we could continue this kind of work in the futures, and also because we need a lot of experts, and also we need to increase the number of the experts in each countries. So I hope the UN OSDs continue to host this kind of work. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you very much, Professor Yu, and all the speakers, and Mr. Park. And thank you for the participants for asking great questions. So this ends all the sessions, and I would like to ask you to warmly welcome Mr. Chang-Gyu Park again, the head of UNOSD, for his closing remark.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to extend to you all, despite the different time zones, even opposite side of the globe. I found that we have a participant from Jamaica. Good morning there. My sincerest gratitude for your interest and participate in this third greenhouse gas inventory system training workshop. I would also like to express my warmest appreciation to the speakers from the government of Bangladesh, the Philippines, Thailand, Pakistan, Singapore, and Nepal for their invaluable contributions. My special thanks also go to Mr. Sergei Kononov from UNFCCC, Ms. Aneta Nikolova, UNESCOP, and Professor Seung-Ji Yu from Women's University for brilliant presentation and discussions. As we are all aware, throughout this workshop, we discussed very important and timely theme, nationally determined contributions and NDCs. This topic in itself requires time-consuming and highly sophisticated techniques and process. It should be made and submitted to the UNFCCC after we carefully calculation and projects into the future based upon well-established GHGs inventories. We need to have multifaceted data gathering, cross-checking system for verification, improving activity data and coefficients and projection modeling to ensure the credibility of our inventories and NDCs. However, this year's workshop was the first case held in virtual format, and it functioned differently when compared to the previous years. Rather than focusing on the technical aspects of the inventory system, this workshop provides a platform where countries in Asia-Pacific region shared their experience and lessons learned from 2020 and the submissions. It has indeed been my great pleasure to hear remarkable insights into every one of your efforts to respond to the climate crisis we are facing, and in a short time because of the time limit, but very active discussion and Q&A sessions among speakers and participants. Distinguished colleagues, as we have now entered the decade of action, achieving inclusive sustainable development remains an assignment for the Asia-Pacific region and beyond. All the 17 goals are interconnected, and consequently, if we successfully accomplish the climate goal, we'll be able to accelerate the achievement of the other goals. Therefore, an integrated approach is vital, not only for sustainable development goals, but for the global GHG mitigation action. Our office, UNOSD, is determined to strengthen cooperation with the national and subnational government, international organizations, research institutions, and civic stakeholders to build capacity for member states to accelerate climate action in the most conducive way. The challenge is enormous, but so are our capabilities when we act together. Before closing, I would like to thank again all the speakers and participants who generously took their time out of busy schedule to share ideas, insights, and experience on the theme. Last but not least, I would like to extend my gratitude to our partners, Thailand Greenhouse Gas Management Organization, TGO, Greenhouse Gas Inventory and Research Center of Korea, GIR, and our UN oyster staffs, whose roles cannot be overstated. I hope to see you again in the following year's workshop face-to-face. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Park. Now, please welcome our last speaker, Mr. Kiachai Maitriwong, Executive Director of TGO, for his closing remark.
Good evening, distinguished participants, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Again, on behalf of Thailand Greenhouse Gas Management Organization, public organization under the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, the loyal Thai government, the co-host of this workshop. First, I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to UNOSD and Greenhouse Gas Inventory and Research Center of Korea, GIR, for awareness, the online workshop. I would like to express my gratitude to all of you for participating online workshop, excellent experiences, lessons learned in NDC from country delegation, and outstanding reflection from various countries which have enabled us to conduct a fruitful workshop. As all of you know that millions of people are exposed to the effects of climate change, and we have to the same mission to reduce greenhouse gas. This will be slowly increase the global average temperature. In addition, we will have to progress on the achievement of National Climate Action Plan, known as NDCs, to the Paris Agreement in the coming years. However, as in the NDC scientific report, which published on last week by UNFCCC, mentioned that current level of climate ambitions are very far from putting us on the pathway that we will meet our Paris Agreement. This is significant challenges for our nation with respect to their greater climate ambition. Throughout today's of this workshop, the issue of development of greenhouse gas management had progressed significantly with strongly domestic in international cooperation. Obviously, science, innovation, and digital technology, as well as investment in human capital, will enable us to support climate action, which NDC target and go beyond climate crisis to achieve sustainable development. Although this time we could not have face-to-face experiences due to COVID-19 pandemic. However, we can recognize the effort that we are all of us took advantage of new technology, and here we are for today. Hopefully, we are looking forward to the opportunity to welcome all of you in Thailand in the next occasion. With that, I bring this workshop to a close. I wish you all well and stay safe from COVID to build forward better and work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we had a very successful workshop this year, even in a virtual format, thanks to all the speakers and participants. Before leaving, I kindly ask everyone to please participate in the survey in the link provided in the chat box. Your feedback on this event will be of great help in planning our future events. Thank you, everyone, and please stay safe, and I wish to see you all again next year. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Congratulations
Thank you.
for this. Congratulations for this really successful event.
Congratulations for this really successful event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to Mr.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Hope to see you in future. Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much for coming.